Barnaby Jones will return next Thursday night at 10, 9 Central and Mountain on most of these stations.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Coming February 21st, it's Faye and the Moon, the latest graphic novel from Franco and the Saturn Sisters. Faye, mourning for her missing mother, sits night after night below the moon that her mother loved dearly. One night she discovers she can pluck the moon out of the star-filled sky. Back safe in her house, she holds it close, feeling comfort at last. Then Faye loses the moon and finds that taking it has awakened ancient monsters, rats, dragons, and more, who hunt for it for themselves. Will Faye be able to reclaim the moon, find her own inner strength, and save the world from eternal darkness? Faye and the Moon comes from the minds of Franco, whose works include Tiny Titans, Superman of Smallville, Archimaniacs, Itty Bitty Hellboy, and The Ghost and the Owl, and art from the Saturn Sisters, whose animated works include Sesame Studios' The New Neighbors, Hulu's The Awesomes by Seth Meyers, and PBS's Mira, Selkie from the Sea. Pre-order Faye and the Moon now. Available in bookstores and comic shops everywhere, February 21st. Good afternoon, or I should say good evening, everybody. Boy, my clock is completely off. Welcome to Word Balloon, the Comic Book Conversations show. John Suntress here. I am happy to welcome back two Word Balloon favorites, Gamal Hennessy, Andy Schmitt. Good to see you guys. Two guys who have separate schools, but I know they've been kind of joining forces, both not only from their school standpoints, but also on YouTube now. They've got a great new podcast that they're doing. Good to see you guys.
You too,
Hello,
John.
sir. Always
Gamal,
good to see you.
tell me about the podcast.
Well, it's called the Comics Connection Podcast. It actually runs bi-weekly. And in that podcast, Andy and I discuss 2 or 3 of the major business issues that are going on in the industry with a special consideration and focus for emerging and independent comic book publishers. Because Andy, who ran Comics Experience for over 10 years, focused a lot of his attention on the creative aspects of teaching people how to make comics. And about 2 years ago, after I did my book, I started the Comics Publishing Institute, which taught people the business end of making comics. So, like most brilliant ideas, after Comic-Con one day in a bar, we sat down and decided to put the 2 schools together. I used to say it was like a Reese's peanut butter cup, but then I realized a lot of people were allergic to chocolate and peanuts, so I stopped using that analogy. But it's the same idea. We take the best of both schools, put them together, and one of the spin-offs from that is the Comics Connection podcast, because we use that to kind of show people how deep we get into a lot of the issues that go on with people who want to publish comics, whether we talk about marketing or distribution or printing or sales or digital comics or AI or a lot of different issues. And because we both have different perspectives on every issue, we can actually have a very engaging conversation. At least I think it's an engaging conversation. I have no idea what people really think about it.
I agree. I will say it as someone who literally stumbled on it. And truly, you guys you did two really great shows about the demise of Comixology, where digital comics are going. And I'm like, wait a minute, I want to get in on that. And damn it, they already recorded it, or I would have said, Andy, you should put me on the goddamn show. But no, it's honestly, so I will absolutely promote Comics Connection and tell you both how much I enjoy your conversations. And that's why I'm happy to have you guys both on now. So Andy, merging with Gamal, has it inspired any new combination courses? I mean, obviously Gamal's got the business side, you've got the actual making comics side, but I don't know. I mean, again, yeah, has it inspired different ideas that you guys weren't doing separately?
Yeah, actually it has. In fact, we have a weekly meeting between the two of us, and even today we were talking about what we do. So Comics Connection is more than just the podcast. It's actually a 24/7 online environment, subscription based. And so we were sort of talking today about, I think I'm going to do like a little mini course in Comics Connection on printing. And just like as a creator, but also as a publisher or a business person, or you're running your own Kickstarter, like, what do you need to know about printing? When should you be contacting a printer? What are how do you ask for a quote properly? And because I also run O&S printing, a printing business, like I can actually get into some pretty good tips for like, how do you maximize your bill? How do you reduce your costs on your printing and all that kind of stuff? So like that specifically, we were talking about this literally earlier today, specifically came out of, this union of our dark forces of evil.
I'm glad to hear it. I think it's a great idea. And I think, again, the ever-changing landscape of the business of comic books. Geez, Gamal, I would imagine maybe some tips changed from your book. Give me the title of your book again, Gamal.
Oh, the name of the book. Hold on. There's a reveal. Yeah. The name of the book is The Business of Independent Comic Book Publishing. And it was designed when I released it to actually walk people through the entire process of publishing a comic of their own. But when I was actually writing the book, or when the book was about to be published, there was an entire chapter of how to get your book picked up by Diamond so you can get into the direct market. Because when I wrote the book, Diamond was the main distributor to the direct market. Now, then COVID hit, then Lunar popped up, and then all the major distributors left Diamond. So we had to quickly readjust that chapter to actually determine, well, how are we going to rework that? There were several chapters on how to actually leverage conventions into your whole business model. And then COVID hit, and there were no conventions. So that chapter turned out to be wrong for a little while too. So the reason I started the school initially was because anytime you write a book like this, and Andy's written some very good books that actually do not have this problem. Every time you write a book like this, as soon as it hits the printer, some of it is old. So instead of updating the book every couple of months, I started the school because news pops up in the comic book industry every week. So every week we have live Q&A sessions where people talk about how does these things affect the books that I'm making? What should I do in terms of social media management? What should I do in terms of advertising? All of the things that are going to be a moving target, especially if you're an independent publisher, we try to deal with, and Andy brings his perspective because he has both the experience as a publisher and as a writer and as someone who's running a printing business with a distribution arm attached. We can really hit all of the notes, entire journey of building a comic book business.
That's great. You want to build on that, Andy, as far as because again, I feel for aspiring creators because the landscape keeps changing under our feet.
And, we're definitely seeing a sea change like right now, and it's hitting the comics industry in multiple ways. There's no telling how it's going to shake out exactly, but it always makes people nervous, right? Because if you're somebody that's kind of on top or doing well, then you're nervous that when the change is over, you're not going to be doing as well. And then you've also got people that may not be doing great, going into it, and there's opportunities for them. So anytime change is afoot, people get really nervous, and sometimes excited too. So yeah, I mean, I had a call because I also do CEX publishing, which is all like creator-owned comics and all that kind of stuff. So I had a call with one of the creators today for a book that we haven't announced yet. But he's been working on it. He and the team have been working on it for well over a year. And, it's not a really fun thing to be on a Zoom call and say, okay, just like reality check, things are a little rocky right now. So as we're planning to announce and to launch, it's a little bit manage expectations, but also just like, let's take a hard look at where we are, where the industry is, what's going on, and see if there are ways to use some of these changes as they're developing to our advantage, to launch the book properly or to play into what's going on. So there is this, as the ground shifts, I mean, you got to kind of figure out and go with the flow, and you got to be able to pivot and move. And, fortunately, Gamal and I have been in the comics industry for about 20 years each. Am I allowed to say that? Am I allowed to reveal your age, Gamal?
You didn't reveal my age. If I started at 2 or 3, then I'm still 23. Yeah. So there you go.
So, we've seen a couple of these things. The one now is different because I feel like it's hitting in multiple sort of facets more at once. Like in the past, it's been like kind of 1 or 2 things kind of destabilized for a bit, but you can kind of count on some other things like, okay, over here, these things are okay. I can focus on those and ride this other thing out. And right now, everything just seems to be kind of shaky. And so, yeah, I mean, we've, with CEX, we've changed our publishing plans. We haven't like just thrown everything out, but we've taken a look at it and gone, okay, well, what makes sense today? And then we're planning about 6 months out and try to go, we think 6 months from now, this will make sense, but we keep looking at the data, we keep looking at everything. And then those are things that I try to bring into lessons. If we're teaching a writing class for comics or an art class for comics, we always, all of comics experiences courses are taught by professionals that are working. So, we bring that to those classes and are really have those honest discussions with up and comers.
I understand. I again, it was a real gut punch for both creators and readers to see Comixology diminish earlier this year, and man, I was really enjoying the Comixology originals in a lot of cases, and had them on Word Balloon. And yeah, there in a lot of cases it was big names, but I do know, and I don't know when this ended, but you could put any creator, it seemed, could put their books at the Comixology marketplace. I don't know if that is still the case. Tell me, guys, give me an update of.
So, yeah, let me go. Gamal, do you want to jump in? Go ahead.
No. You go first.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, Comixology before it was moved over to Amazon, right? Had Submit, and really anybody could go in to submit, and there was an approval process. But I think that the goal, knowing some of the guys that started Comixology, the goal was to say yes, was to get to yes to those projects, and which is super cool and was, I think, hugely beneficial to a lot of creators.
Sure.
Then it moved over to Amazon, and then sort of slowly Amazon sort of shifted things around. And just to give you an idea, we launched CEX about a year and a half ago. And we got literally our first 2 months worth of books on Comixology, and then they stopped taking them. It's like that was part of our distribution plan. It was like, well, we got digital figured out, so that's great. And then just didn't. And now everything goes to the it's not the Amazon Marketplace. What is it? The KDP, the
Kindle. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Kindle Direct Press.
Yeah, press.
So
you can still submit, but the truth is, what we found is people just weren't searching it the way they were Comixology, and so the return on those were like legitimately, we hit the point 2 months in where we were like, we're just not even going to bother anymore. Cause
really? Okay, so you didn't even do the Kindle thing.
No, we did for a couple of months, and then we just kind of stopped because I don't know if it has to do with their interface. I didn't really dive into it. I just, we looked at the numbers, we kind of looked at it and thought it wasn't as good a reading experience either. And at some point you go, I want my projects to present well. Like, I think that's really important for a visual medium. And so you just go, this isn't it. And then you take that step back and you go, either we need to develop something on our own, which for a small press publisher like CX is probably cost prohibitive, like to try and develop your own app, or let's keep our heads to the ground, let's have conversations with people, and let's see what's coming up next.
Gamal has feel free to amplify on that, but also, are there alternate platforms where they would have gone to submit on Comixology can go now and get their stuff online? Because obviously, producing comics digitally is a great first wave to generate interest. And my friend Ryan Brown is a classic example of that, with God Hates Astronauts, and then his ability to subsequently make more books from that experience. Right now, 8 Billion Genies at Image, him and Charles Soule. Yeah, Charles Soule. So anyway, but Gamal, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, even before Amazon hamstrung Comixology, there were alternative platforms trying to gain market share, trying to gain traction. And I think with the Amazon pulling back from Comixology, there is still the room in the industry. In fact, the industry needs that killer app that's going to be the equivalent of like a YouTube for video, where people can go and not just, because a lot of platforms now have a decent enough experience so that you can use it as a marketing platform, quickly get the images and the samples out to generate interest that you can then leverage into your crowdfunding, leverage into your print. But at a certain point, comics needs to have a digital medium that is actually going to allow for people to have careers. The revenue has to be, you have to be able to make enough revenue from digital to, make enough from digital from a net basis, so that you don't necessarily have to rely on print, and you don't necessarily have to rely on 2 other jobs to publish comics. You have things like Omnibus, you have things like Global Comics, you have things like Webtoon and Tapas, which have, in their own kind of segments of the industry, they do have their success stories. You have, like, I have clients who they only published on Webtoons, and they were making close to 6 figures and hiring teams and bringing in like all this other kind of stuff. But I think that's still 2 to 3% of everybody on Webtoons. I mean, it may be like any other entertainment medium overall, where you have a small percentage at the top making all the money and a lot of other people struggling to get by. But the model has to be something close to YouTube, where people can get their books out easily and make money. And that opportunity is still there. I don't know which key is going to fill that void, but at this point, it doesn't look like it's going to be Comixology.
Certainly not. Absolutely. And again, and you put in as well the 1%ers that get invited to Panel Syndicate, Marcos Martin's platform for digital comics. And you get other people like Substack, certainly, for the last 2 years, made a big splash. And I keep trying to follow up with my friends that did get offered grants from Substack to make new books there. And it seems a lot of them, it was just a 1-year deal as far as the money is concerned. But the good news is, obviously, they were able to build their community. I do think, regardless of Omnibus Global, in fact, I should, full disclosure, everybody, Zest World is advertising on Word Balloon Audio this week, and I'm glad to put them in the conversation as well. I think all of these are, capable of giving us good digital comics. But yeah, I just don't know how available it is to just start. But the onus is on the creator to really build their community. And certainly the one percenters have that advantage of DC and Marvel audiences following them, and that's wonderful. But by the same token, I point to my friend Ryan Brown, who was a nobody, but churning out a webcomic, God Hates Astronauts, and getting a buzz around that. And I mean, it's hard work, but it can be done.
I mean, let me just interject there. Saying that Ryan Brown was a nobody, I mean, that guy was on the Montel Williams show before he was a comics head.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that. Please, it's like when I found out that because I didn't watch The Real World, and it's like Judd Winnick. So yeah, I was a cast member, and I'm like, oh my god, and I am like so out of the woods, have no idea. But I'm like, tell me everything, Judd. That had to be insane. But no, please, what was Ryan Brown's thing on?
It's really Ryan's story to tell, but it is.
I'm gonna bug him.
Yeah, but yeah, he was on Montel Williams.
All right, fair enough. Well, I'm doing Charles and Ryan's 8 Billion Genies panel at C2E2. So
you gotta ask him. It's super.
Thank
fun.
you, Andy. That's gonna be great. Well, go on. Excuse me.
Well, I was just gonna say, the other kind of big, the big shift in digital comics from when Comixology started. I don't know how another company would be able to do what Comixology did, in the sense that Comixology at the time had the exclusive rights to digital, like Marvel and DC and Image and all of those things. Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, at least those three, all have their own apps now and don't particularly want their books everywhere else because they want you to subscribe to their apps. So that the idea of there being, the one-stop shop for your digital comics is kind of rough. And so there's maybe one scenario if you have a couple that are successful and have some funding, they may compete by going to publishers and saying, we want an exclusive deal. We want you exclusively on this platform. Or you might see them looking to find ways to differentiate their version of a comic on their platform or something like that. But that one hub to go to is going to be very difficult to get back to that model. I know, I've got like a whole folder on my phone of like all the different comics apps to use, and there's also like a lot of those that we've talked about, like Webtoons and Tapas, like they're kind of their own ecosystems.
100%. Yes.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's like one big solution. I don't think there's going to be like one juggernaut that comes out of this. And so a lot of it's going to be certainly if you're an independent creator, kind of navigating all this on your own, then you're going to have some sort of means, a rubric or whatever to kind of figure out like, well, which platforms do I want to be on? Like, what makes that platform good for me to be on? Because one thing I'm worried about being everywhere is if you're everywhere, you're kind of nowhere. If that makes sense. Like I'm a little worried about being like the idea that like everything's just too easy to find, or or that there's going to be price wars, and as a publisher, like there is an expense. Like I know the argument is like, well, you didn't print the comic, but there's an expense to develop it for digital, make sure it works on each of the platforms, all that sort of stuff. And that's got to make sense for a publisher or an independent creator. And I think that's one of the, that was kind of the thing with Amazon. It was like, it doesn't make sense for us to spend the time to actually make a digital thing for the return on the investment. And, that's there are those different models. There's sort of the Netflix model where you pay your fee and you get in and you can read anything. And then there's the more the Comixology model. I mean, they had unlimited, but like generally, like I can buy the PDF and it's mine. I get to download it and that sort of thing. And then there's the the scrolling model where it's online and it's free to use, and they get advertising money or however it is that they make money. So I don't know that any of those is a perfect solution, but they're all there's a lot of parties involved. There's the creators, there's the publishers, there's the platforms themselves, potentially advertisers, and of course fans ultimately.
Sean just made a comment. Remember how Hulu started, several networks created it. The major comic publishers need to do the same and share cost revenue of a digital service. Well, I hear you, Sean, but I kind of agree with Andy where it's not in their interest to do that. They also have the benefit of being established publishers, and we want to come for Hellboy. We want to come for BPRD, all the Marvel heroes, all the DC heroes. So they do have this built-in audience. The trick is really for the independents. And then he also says Asia has the best model. They should work towards it. Well, certainly in the case of Webtoons, the Korean company, South Korean company that is doing so well. Mentioning vertical, and I want to know what you guys think as well. I was just talking to Mark Wade on Monday and asking him about Thrillbent, the digital company he created with Liam Sharp and Peter Krause, I want to say. But yeah, and he said, obviously the Webtoon tapas model is vertical progression rather than swiping in panel to panel or showing a full page and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's interesting. I wonder, Andy, from a creative standpoint, is it obviously that's a concern in terms of how you are going to present the stuff. And then Gamal, I want to know too, as a reader, do you have a preference?
From the creative
you want me to go first?
Oh yeah, you go ahead.
The thing is about the difference between vertical scroll and, well, not the difference. What you really want as a creator, especially emerging independent, you want to be able to maximize all the different revenue streams that you have. In the same way a film will have a theatrical release, streaming release, you want to be able to hit those windows. And the vertical scroll can be like your first release that actually leads to your crowdfunding, that actually leads to your printing, which, down that waterfall of readers, because there are different markets. The only problem is, well, traditionally the problem was the way you for every panel for a vertical scroll is different than when you format for a traditional page. So if you're going to go from one to the other, you have to factor in that cost to your profit and loss statement. But there are companies, I think 2 weeks ago, Rocket Ship announced that they were doing stuff with Webtoon, taking that to print. And then Dark Horse, I think this week, announced that they were doing the same thing with some tapas books. So a lot of these vertical scrolling platforms that primarily appeal to a younger audience who doesn't necessarily have a relationship to traditional comics. They appeal more to female audiences that are traditionally underserved by traditional comics. But those audiences don't necessarily cross over to crowdfunding or to print. So if you have a book that has potentially wide appeal, you can hit each one of those windows and take some revenue from each one, defer your cost over each one, so that by the time you get to, like I said, just selling it on your website conventions, that's all pure profit. Sorry, Andy, you go ahead.
No, please, Andy. Yeah.
No, that's great. And speaking of Rocket Ship, I just met Tom Akel. Is that how you say his last name?
Mm-hmm.
Akel. I just met him this past weekend in Pittsburgh, where I was for Comics Pro, and man, his books all look very different, right? Like the physical books, and I'm sure that is to some degree because of how they have to be formatted. And one of the things that's really difficult when you're going from one platform or medium to another is that adaptation process. Now, we tend to talk about adaptation in terms of, Stephen King wrote a novel, and now, Stanley Kubrick is adapting it for film, and it's a wholly different product. What we're talking about adaptation is usually taking literally the same, illustrations, word balloons, and all that sort of stuff. But there is a ton of work to adapt that to a print medium and format, and how are your page turns going to work? How are your how are you going to read the panels in the right order? And every time I see somebody, because there's always somebody online going, I've figured it out, right? 4 phone screens equals 1 page. So this is how I do it. It's a quarter a page, and then it'll all work out great. And it that could be helpful as a starting point, maybe, but what you wind up doing is losing when you sort of put it in that sort of assembly line sort of thing, cookie cutter sort of thing. You lose what makes both media that you're trying to do cool. So you don't have like what you can do that's really cool with a vertical scroll, and you kind of lose what you can do that's really cool with a printed comic. And so there winds up being a lot of design and production work that goes into that conversion and adaptation process. And one of the things that's great about what Tom does at Rocket Ship is he and I assume his team of designers, they do a really nice job with it. Like they really know the stuff and they really care. And that's as much as I'm going to plug some other publisher.
Well, I hope they're at C2E2. I would love to see examples of that. You're right. It's almost subconscious as a reader, and I wonder what you guys think in terms of when they try to adapt a digital comic into paper form. I remember the Spider-Woman motion comic that Marvel was doing about 10 years ago, and then reading the issue. And yeah, there was just something different that didn't work. And Andy, I think you explained it very clearly when you say when you have a cookie cutter four-panel page progression, that's something is missing. Something is definitely missing. So yeah, I would love to see examples of how they try to crack that code and make both products, pleasant.
Right.
So, well, also let's see. I've got the list here of different companies. Hey, man, honestly, everybody, I really like Zest World. They've got a lot of name creators are there. Joelle Jones is there, and Peter Tomasi and Alex Segura. I'm going to talk to Alex on Monday. Hope to talk to Joelle very soon. She moved Lady Killer over there. Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor are doing a really fun book there. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I do think it's good to have product like that. I certainly support several Substacks and have been talking to a lot of Substack people. But yeah, I am concerned about the others. Gamal, help me out with Global and Omnibus. I haven't been there yet. What kind of product do they offer over there?
Well, Global Comics first to be for the sake of transparency, I worked for Global Comics for about a year when they first launched in 2020. And Global Comics is still a client of my law, so we will not be revealing anything that is attorney-client confidentiality.
Of course.
But
no.
What Global Comics actually offers Global Comics actually offers the thing that differentiates Global Comics, especially from something like Comixology, is twofold. One is what they're actually offering creators on the back end. There's a lot of information that can be collected about everything that happens with your book once you put it online that is miles ahead of what Comixology was doing, because Comixology, you basically put your book on there and you didn't know what happened to it. You didn't know how many people read it. You didn't know how many people bought it. You didn't know anything about it. They either sent you money or they didn't. That was basically the gist of it.
Yeah.
With Global Comics, every book you put up, you can determine who actually read it, how many people read it, where those people came from, how much they read, how long each person spent reading each panel, and you can aggregate that over time. They allow you to provide your comics for free or for a paid service, but they allow you to determine where the free ends and the paid stops. So let's say you have a book where there's a really big cliffhanger at the end of page 5. So you offer the book free from page 1 to page 5. And then you tell people they have to pay for it, which actually gets you a lot better conversions, because you're now not asking people to pay without anything up front, without seeing anything, and you're asking them to pay right at the point where they need to know more. So there's a lot of different functionality, and they optimize for vertical scroll and for traditional page. They have tools to help you with your Kickstarter. They started working, I think, with Source Point Press to get prestige editions in print, with print on demand for any book that goes on there. So there's a lot of things that Global Comics is offering if you're a creator to go online. For the reader, it's actually a much simpler setup, because it's I think it's $7 or $8 monthly service, all you could read. And they have, like, out of the top 10 publishers, I think they've got 4 or 5. And to Andy's point, so many publishers have their own apps now. The idea of getting all of them together is going to be a big ask, but they have quite a few major publishers, independent publishers, webtoon publishers. So there you go. That's
Okay,
global.
that's cool.
Omnibus, I don't think started yet. I think Omnibus is
Ah,
starting in the spring,
okay,
and they're establishing themselves with a lot of um come out of the gate with a lot of major content. But I haven't seen the interface. I don't know what the back end looks like, but they're positioning themselves to be a major player.
okay. Andy Stanley has a question: is the subscription service better than selling individual issues or trades?
Well, I'm sure different publishers or creators' mileage can vary, but from my standpoint as a publisher, we have, as a smaller publisher, right? I don't, if you're on a bigger scale, if you're Dark Horse or IDW or Dynamite or Marvel or whatever, it could be the model could totally be different. But when we're a relatively small publisher, it's up and coming. For us, selling a digital copy of the book is probably better for us, because if what you're doing is sharing that $7 subscription across all the comic books they read, and somebody reads 100 comics and they read one of them as a CEX book, then I'm not seeing much in the way of revenue, and I still have to pay the royalties to the creators and all that sort of stuff. So for me, at least at this point, where CEX is, probably the downloadable is the way to go. Yeah.
No, I hear you, Gamal. I so hear you about the analytics that it sounds like Global provides, because when I talk to various podcasters that sign on various networks, I'm not going to name anybody either. I have no legal relationships with anybody to out. But that said, I'm always like, well, how many people are downloading? I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? I'm like, that is at the very least, you should be getting, and they're like, well, they tell me monthly. I'm like, I get daily numbers, daily. And just like Gamal described, and forgive me, everybody, I hope you don't feel like it's an invasion of privacy, but it is interesting and good to know what countries are listening, the male, female demographic, the age group demographic, all of that is very helpful. And I mean, listen, Word Balloon, I do what I want. I'm sorry, it's a very selfish show in terms of my guests and my subjects, like tonight, for example. And I'm fine with that. And luckily, the audience seems to be fine with that as well. But it is interesting to see when I don't have Dave Gibbons or Mark Waid on, or Kelly Sudaconic, how people respond to a discussion like this. And it really is. It's interesting and helpful. So I it is amazing, and it's going to be interesting to see. I love Marvel Unlimited. I'm so glad that I subscribe to that. It makes things a lot easier following books and getting prepared to do a guest interview from a podcast standpoint. From a reader standpoint, I love it. I mean, it's like, man, I really want to read the original What If series from the early 70s. Because I was buying it when it was brand new. And it was such a delight to be able to go back and read that. They don't have everything. I was looking for John Byrne's Lost Generation Marvel series.
Yeah. The X-Men, The Lost Years, that one? Yeah.
Not the X-Men one. It was one about, they set it in the 50s. And I don't know
how many... Yeah, I do remember that. I think that was the Lost Generation. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also I was looking for Ed Brubaker's The Marvels, that took all the timely 40s characters and had them all together in a big story and stuff. I have the hardback somewhere buried in a box somewhere, but I got the service.
And you mentioned that What If series from the 70s, and my mind immediately flashed to the first time they ever did it was the What If Phoenix Had Not Died issue, and like, man, I read the cover off that book. It was fascinating.
I remember the What If Conan existed in the modern world, or came to the modern world, and that was a great one shot Conan story that Barry Windsor Smith did. So stuff like that. Wesley says, loving behind the scenes stuff. I'm a data nerd, so I want all the data points. Yeah, man, absolutely.
I was gonna say that the data stuff is huge.
Finish your thought, Andy, and then by all means.
So the data stuff is huge, and one of the things that's happened. So when I was starting CEX with my crew, I thought it was really, really important to build a very strong infrastructure, both in terms of how books come through the process, how we work on them, how to make sure the printing is really solid. We've got all the right partners, but distribution was a big one, right? So when we launched with our very first comic, we were distributed by Diamond, and I think it was only like 3 months later we started with Lunar as well. We also have bookstore distribution set up. So we're getting data from all of our partners, and fortunately, John that works with me is a data hound. Like, he wants that data. He will scrub the data. He will analyze the data, which is great because I don't like math, and he will just do all of that. And we have really, really good conversations about what things, what do the numbers bear out. And so what was fascinating to me going to Comics Pro, where I'm meeting with over 100 retailers and having conversations about what's working in your store, and a lot of them carry our books and, talked about what worked and what didn't work as well and all that kind of stuff. I took all that feedback. I took pages and pages and pages of notes, and some of it, like you hear it and you're like, oh, I bet that's right. And some of it you hear it and you're like, a little suspect, right? And then the rest of it you just take down. And now what we do now is we go and we look at all those notes and we see what the data tells us, and we see like, where do they line up? Oh, we got this feedback, and the data says, yeah, that's probably not working, so we need to make those adjustments. So you kind of combine it all. So now I've got that in-person feedback, and then we've got the analytic feedback, and that's huge. And I don't know that many publishers do that kind of thing. Honestly, I've worked at a lot of publishers, and from everything that I have ever seen, they just kind of are just like, we put comics out and they sell, and that's how that works. I imagine that has changed in the last several years, at least to some extent. But Diamond was sort of well known for not sharing data, and other places are much more willing to share the data. So, I know what stores are ordering how many of our books and all that kind of information now in a way that was not possible 3 years ago, and it's super helpful to us.
Gamal?
Well, based on what Andy said, I now have 2 points. One is in terms of like the data analytics and understanding, going through all that work to do the market analysis and to do that kind of sales analysis is work that if you're an emerging or independent publisher, you may find it is a big ask if you're going to be making comics, having a day job, having a family, maybe once in a while you go to sleep, right? And then to go back in and out, like churn and scrub all of this data to figure out where your comics actually perform the best. And in a lot of times at Comics Connection, we push, tell people you can set up a business to make your own comics, but if you don't have that kind of time and you don't have the wherewithal to do all of those things, that's when it makes a lot of sense to actually look for a creator-owned deal, to go with a publisher whose business it is to get all that information and do all of that work that you can't do or you won't do. As long as you find a good deal, as long as the company is actually doing it, because like Andy said, there's a lot of publishers who have creator-owned deals who are not doing this in that kind of work. So they're not necessarily doing any more than you would be doing. But if you know that this is how the company operates and that's how their marketing and analytics work, it makes much more sense to have someone do that kind of heavy lifting than for you to try to do it yourself, knowing that you're really not going to do it. The other point that I wanted to talk about was go back to something that Stanley asked about subscription versus single issue sales. A lot of it depends on when you're talking about getting a piece of a subscription, what piece are you getting? Because the way your contract is set up, the subscription fee could be divided in dozens of different ways. It could be more or less beneficial to you depending on how many comics you have on the platform, or how many pages get read, or how many issues get read, or what the subscription fee is, or anything like that. So before you can have that pure understanding of this subscription is good or this subscription is bad, there are different subscription payouts. So you have to understand that when you are looking at the different platforms. The other thing to look at is when you're talking about single issue sales, it's like, well, how much are you getting per issue? how much of the revenue do you have to split with the platform, with the creators, with everybody else to understand which one makes the most sense? And the last thing, a lot of people, when they're thinking about digital comics, they're not necessarily thinking about crowdfunding. But when you offer a digital book on crowdfunding, the actual sales multiple, even though Kickstarter is not a sales platform and it's not distribution, but what you get per issue of a digital comics is so much higher than what you're getting on any platform that you have to consider crowdfunding as part of your digital strategy. The only downside is those time windows are very short. Get 30 days, maybe less.
Also, crowdfunding takes over your entire existence, not just for the 20 to 30 days you're running it, but at least a month on either side of that thing. Yeah.
No, I hear you, man. And it's one of the things. Go ahead, please, Gamal. Go ahead.
Well, it's just, and it is a huge amount of work to get that out. But if you look at how much you're getting per PDF that people relative to get from a comicsology, the Kickstarter is almost always going to be a higher multiple per issue.
No, I hear you. I have several friends that have been doing Kickstarters for individual issues, and it's a very good business model. And I wanted to ask you guys about crowdfunding because Comixology, Kickstarter has certainly grown its own community, and people are looking for books that are through Kickstarter, just on its own, regardless of what else they might be doing online at their website, direct market, whatever. And I wondered if the other GoFundMe, Zoop, if they are establishing their own communities, if you guys are aware of that and how well those crowdfunding platforms are doing in creating a community that is looking for more stuff to buy.
Come on.
Hey, before you start, Gamal, forgive me.
Well,
Andy,
I know Zoop.
Hold on 1 second, Gamal. We got a weird echo happening, and I think, Andy, it's on your end.
Oh.
So I don't know if you can either turn down your monitor, and maybe that would help.
Is this any better?
Well, I'm talking. Let me see. Yeah, I cannot. And now I cannot hear the echo. So sorry. Please, Gamal, continue.
Well, I know that Zoop is gaining some traction, but they have a slightly different model than like Kickstarter. Zoop is actually providing a full suite of services. So they will actually, you bring your book to them, they will actually handle marketing. They will actually handle the fulfillment. They'll handle that crowdfunding through their own platform, but then they're the ones going out and getting the book printed. They're getting shipped. So it's more of a white glove service than Kickstarter. And I think there's less upfront work that you have to do if you go with Zoop. However, if Zoop's providing all those services, you have to pay for each service that you get. So the money that comes in, relatively speaking, you're not getting as much of that as if you did the work yourself. So Zoop Zoop, because they put in so much effort into each individual book, they are much more stringent about which books they're bringing in. They want to make sure that there's a return on investment for every book. So it's not like there's not 200, 300 different projects on Zoop every month, the way there is Kickstarter. Right. Kickstarter is more of a open field. If you're willing to put in the work, there's the platform. They take their cut on the back end, and then Bob's your uncle. It's it. It's over.
Absolutely.
So it's depending on what you get, and it depends on what you pay for. So that's where you have to keep that in mind when you're figuring out which model you're going to work with.
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, right now we're developing at CX, we're developing a Zoop campaign and a Kickstarter campaign for two different projects, of course. So it won't be like apples to apples, but the experience on so far, and we're just at the beginning stages of both, the experiences so far have been very, very different. Jordan and Eric over at Zoop are really invested they clearly really want this to happen. Whereas with Kickstarter, it's the platform. There's occasionally some people over at Kickstarter that you can kind of talk to. Like they definitely have their people that kind of curate comics and that kind of thing. So it's not like you're just hung out to dry, but fortunately I have a lot of friends that have gone through that process and have kind of helped me out with some of the key people I need to talk to or key things we need to do on the campaigns. And they're not, so far the experience has been very different, and even the campaigns themselves seem very different. Kickstarter is kind of its own community. Whereas, Zoop, I feel like, is part of the comics community. And I'm sure that over time it will develop into its own sort of engine where there are just people that love going on Zoop. But you probably know people that there are people that just go on Kickstarter and like, I'm gonna go spend some money on Kickstarter today, and that's what they do. And it's great. And there's a lot of really cool things I think about crowdfunding, which is like you get to be a part of the process. You get to be on the ground floor of something. There's a lot of really cool things that go with it. But for us, one of the things that, again, about building that infrastructure out is we actually have the capability of pretty much handling our own printing, our own distribution and fulfillment and that kind of thing. And there are some things I'd probably bring in some partners for just for convenience sake. So, I don't necessarily need the full white glove services, but at the same time, I'm running a publishing company, I'm running a printing company, I'm running a comic book school. I try to see my wife and kids, so there are those times where you're just like, it's definitely worth the money to not have to do that myself. And I feel like that's one of the things that a lot of comic creators, newer creators, really get hung up on is it's going to cost me money to have somebody do this. And sometimes it's better. And sometimes, if there's a fulfillment service that gets these giant discounts on their shipping rates, you may not even be paying that much more to have somebody else do it because some of their profit comes from some of the savings on, whether it's the shipping rates or bulk pricing on different things. And so you may wind up not actually paying significantly more money, but you may save yourself, 60 hours worth of boxing things up. And that 60 hours, you could be doing something else that could be making money, or it could be, going to Six Flags, because that's fun.
Pardon me. Wesley wants to know if you guys feel hiring analysts would move the needle. Not every publisher has someone like CEX, but even a beginner analyst who can't code much is worth $50,000 a year minimum. Well, that's good, Wesley. I'm glad you're hiring and can afford to play at $50,000. But yeah, your guys' thoughts.
Well, the thing is, because at this point, global comics is still relatively small, you still can get individual assistants to kind of walk you through the analytics and help you understand what the numbers mean and how to set things up, because they have so many different data points that you can choose from. They'll help you figure out which data points are most important to you. They'll help you figure out how to actually track them on the system and have it be automatic going forward, so that you'll get every day or every week, you'll get an email that says, this is how many pages were read. This is where your traffic came from. This is how many panels people looked at. This is if you have multiple books, this is the books that are doing well. This categories that are doing well. So you don't necessarily need, with a company like Global Comics, you don't need an analyst. You just need basically to sit down with Eric, who's their business development VP. Sit down with him for half an hour. He'll tell you what you need to know. And then you can just go off and just track it. And until your business model changes or until there's a bump, you don't have to worry about it. So it's good to it is good to bring in somebody who knows what it is that's going on, but you don't have to hire them for $50,000 a year. I mean, come on. Nobody.
Yeah, I gave Wesley power to the workers. Don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of aspiring creators may not have $50,000 for an analyst to figure out what's going on. And frankly, the demographics I get, hey, I'm a math idiot. I am happy to admit that. But that said, the demographics I get from my network Spreaker, very easy to understand, very simple to disseminate. And I'm not married and I don't have kids, so that certainly gives me a little more time. But truly, it's something that I look at on a monthly basis just to kind of see where the trends are. So there you go. I wanted to ask you guys, Andy, hey, great job on Infinite Frontier and your Earth 3 comic book that you did. Was it last year or 2 years ago?
Yes.
Okay,
2022, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Beginning of 2022, Crime Syndicate was coming out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so plans for more DC?
No.
All right.
No, it's not like no, I've run screaming from there, but just I was writing the Crime Syndicate comic and working on Generation Shattered and Forged, the two 80-page giants that were coming out right around the same time. And I was trying to launch a publishing company, and I quickly learned I can't do it all. Right. Sure. I am working on a couple of creator-owned things. Good. That will likely, this may shock you, likely come out from CEX, but even those, I have trouble getting to those, and those are mine.
I hear you, man.
I did have a ton of fun on that stuff, though. Like, I love Crime Syndicate, and like being able to write an evil version of Batman is really fun.
I don't blame you. Yeah, man.
Gamal, thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Gamal, I was looking up to get your book, which we see again behind you right there, Business for Independent Comic Book Publishers. But also I was wondering, I saw a few fiction novels with the name Gamal Hennessy. Is that you? Is it somebody else?
Yeah, that's me. Between 2012 and 2016, I wrote 6 novels, and I have my own publishing company, so I published all of them on my own. They're all part of a series. They didn't sell like Harry Potter or anything, so it's not like that's probably the reason I stopped, and the idea is because I talk to a lot of people who are prose writers, and they may work on the same book for like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I said, well, I just, at a certain point, being around a lot of creative people and having all those conversations and reading the same kind of stuff that they're reading, the bug will hit you eventually. No matter if you're on the business side, it's going to hit you eventually. So at a certain point, I just, I took half a decade, churned out like 7 novels, and I said, okay, that's enough. I can pump the brakes now. Especially since I was my Harry Potter number, so I stopped.
I understand. Seriously, man, that's amazing. And I have a good friend, Margaret Larkin, who did a great book called Wicker Park Wishes, and it's kind of a female high fidelity set in the 90s about being somebody single living in Chicago and dating and everything. Great book. And I have patrons like David Gill that have written books and others, novels and stuff. And again, running the gamut of Word Balloon, talking to them, but also talking to Brad Meltzer and other, fine novelists and stuff. No, I'm fascinated by the biz, and also how ebooks have helped or hurt, the book business, the reading business, and everything. I was bummed. I don't know if Neotext is still doing short story genre fiction, and man, they were tapping like Howard Chaykin and Ben Percy and really great creatives to make genre fiction, only a little shorter and stuff. So yeah, and I think it's a good time as far as content for genre fiction, but yeah, I just always want to know everybody's individual stories. So thank you.
No worries. I think the other thing is people should understand is something that we were talking about a little bit earlier, is that digital books have done far better in terms of getting, increasing revenue, increasing sales in ways that did not actually hurt print books. And, audiobooks did the same thing, multiplied the potential revenue for prose in ways that the comic book industry has not actually figured out yet. Somehow, almost every different type of entertainment medium has figured out digital in ways that make money, except for Spotify. Musicians aren't making money from Spotify, but that's an outlier. Everybody else has figured out a way to actually generate revenue from digital in ways that comics hasn't yet. So that opportunity is still there.
There was a lot of fear in the early 2000s around digital comics. There was a lot of fear that was going to put retailers out of business, because why would you go pick up the physical thing if you can just press a button and you've got it? There was fear from publishers. Like, are we going to be able to charge, what we need? Because if it's that easy to click with a button, it feels like it should be free, even though there's a ton of work and expense that goes into it. I mean, like, everybody was afraid about it. And what typically happens, and I say typically because there are cases, and the music industry is a really terrible example of this. Well, it's a great example, but it's terrible what happened. It can backfire. But usually what happens is, if you're able to reach more people, with another version of the thing, they're interested in, buying the print version or what have you. And, Gamal mentioned, feature releases, right? Movie releases. I go see a movie in the theater. I really like it. Well, I'll buy it on iTunes when it comes out, or I'll buy the Blu-ray, or they put out some special edition of it with some super cool lenticular cover or some other 90s tribute item. And, I'm there. I'm going to buy that thing. So, that's definitely what we have not seen. I don't think we've seen digital really hurt print sales in comics. I haven't seen any real compelling evidence in that case, but we haven't seen it really help them either. And so there's some sort of disconnect, and if somebody is able to crack that code, they will probably live a long, blessed life, full of money.
As we wrap up, guys, any final thoughts? This has been great, and I know it's going to be very helpful to aspiring creators that are taking these first steps. And that's why, truly, everybody, I was already a fan of both Andy and Gamal's when they had separate companies, but now both are under the Comics Connection umbrella. Correct, guys?
Yep, Comics Connection, and then Comics Experience is still its own thing that offers the courses, the dedicated courses. But yeah, Comics Connection, if you go to the Comics Experience website, Comics Connection is on there. You can sign up right from our website. It doesn't matter where you sign up for it. It's not like it benefits one of us more than the other. Comics Connection is our thing, and it's great. And we've got online forums too. So we've got a Discord and a forum system for longer things, and it's really, really it's really fun. I really enjoy it a lot. And I love actually being partnered with Gamal on it, because we play off each other. It turns out we play off each other pretty well. So yeah.
As evidenced by this conversation. And please, Gamal, any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, I would like everybody to, if you actually think that this conversation was helpful to you, go to the Comics YouTube page, because we have several, I guess we're up to episode 7 or 8 of the podcast that we've been doing. But the thing that I want everybody to take away from this is that it takes a lot longer to make a comic than it does for the industry to change. So if you start making a comic now with the industry the way it is now, 18 months from now, 2 years from now, the industry may be slightly different in ways that you cannot anticipate, whether it's marketing or distribution or sales prices or, page rates or something else. So it helps, no matter how you do it, to kind of keep up with the way things are changing and understand how those changes impact the book you're doing now, so that when your book does come out, you're not trying to release a book designed for an environment that doesn't exist.
Sage advice from both guys today, Andy and Gamal. Comicsexperience.com, right?
Yep.
And comicsconnection.com. Those are the places to go to glean more.
Well, you'd have to go to comicsconnection.net. Comicsconnection.com, and that's going to lead you.
I knew somebody was going to have a .net, but that's fine, man. I still hear you.
Yeah.
But comicsconnection.net, comicsexperience.com, and you will glean a lot of free information, but also worth your while if you really want to make a sound investment to get involved with both of these guys and what they're doing and what they're offering. This is legit information. They both have been doing it for a long time, and both have great experience helping people succeed as well as themselves and their successes. So, guys, thank you so much. This has been terrific. And please, I'll be watching.
You, sir.
And probably find another reason to have you guys on sooner than later. Andy, I know is going to be at C2E2.
Yeah, I'll be there. We'll hang out.
Excellent. Couple panels or?
Yes, I've got 4 panels that I was not prepared to discuss, but yes, I have 4 panels. So I'll definitely be at C2E2 and going to have a lot of meetings with creators while I'm there too. But and John, I just want to say you've been doing Word Balloon for a while, and it too has been such like an inspirational and such a great source of information for folks, upcoming creators, and myself. I have learned a ton from listening to you and to the people you interview. So thank you, and of course, thanks to everybody that's listening to Word Balloon and supporting Word Balloon. It is a very valuable thing for the industry. So thank you.
Thanks, man. No, I really appreciate
Absolutely.
it. That's awesome.
Same.
Well, it's very kind, Gamal. Thank you, man. No, you guys are great, and I'm really glad that we've gotten to know each other over the years, both of you, and look forward to more conversations in the future. So, everybody, thanks a lot for watching and listening. There may or may not be a Word Balloon Live tomorrow night. We're still negotiating. Me and my potential guest. I'll let you know on social media, and more coming, throughout the month of March. So stay tuned for more. But until next time, everybody, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.